The sun is just going down. It's just behind the hills. There's wind in the trees. We have seen 2 cars all day. Welcome to this edition of Overland Workshop. I'm Andrew St Pierre White. Join me as I share my passion for building 4-wheel drive trucks and travelling to the remotest parts of the world. I want to talk about risk. Gwyn and I are on our own. We are travelling through a country we're not particularly familiar with. I mean, I consider myself very familiar with Africa, particularly sub-Saharan Africa. So in travelling anywhere there, I feel very, very comfortable. I feel less comfortable travelling in Australia just because it's less familiar to me. But at the same time, we've been now travelling, just the two of us, all on our own, and we've been exposing ourselves to risk. What are those risks? So in this Overland Workshop, I am going to present my thoughts on the subject, and then I'm going to ask our good friend Paul Marsh to join us, and then Jeramay James from Seattle to join us, and I'd like to hear you guys, I'd like to hear your opinion on risk. You've all been through it, maybe many, many years ago, but we still now, even today, even though we have, all of us, a lot of experience, we are aware of the risks. And I think that the most important thing when it comes to risk management is to be aware of the risks, learn what they are. So in a situation like this, I guess, in Western Australia, for extremely remote travel, what are my risks? Now, I had a thought today, and I was going to put us in a situation where in other words, there was a risk management issue, and I decided against doing something because the risk was too high. And it was to drive up that very, very steep hill there. It's very beautiful, and because it's there and it's tempting. And I thought to myself, well, I think the car would do it, but I don't know because I've never driven it off-road. It's a new machine. It's quite heavier than I'm used to. I don't know it well. I'm not familiar with it. Of course, I'm very familiar with driving over that kind of terrain, but I'm not familiar with the vehicle. Had I been with other people and a vehicle probably more capable off-road, they would have gone first, and perhaps I would have watched them and then been able to reassess the risk of climbing that hill. And what's wrong with just walking up instead? But here, sitting down on my, just the two of us, sitting and looking at that hill and thinking, it would be nice to drive up that hill. What happens if something goes terribly wrong? In other words, we have an accident. What would happen up there? It's steep. It looks like it's on an incline both up and it's not a flat climb. And no hill looks as steep as it really is when on video. So I decided not to try and make it up this hill, and it was a wise decision. Now, so if you're going to take a risk, investigate the risk. Driving up here blindly would have been very stupid. Now, on close inspection, would my vehicle have made it? Not easily. Steep, quite a bit more weight on the back wheels than the front. Lift up the front, lose traction on the front, and it's loose ground, loose pebbles. Very difficult to gain traction. So I can see myself about here losing traction and stopping. And I have to go back. I have minimal braking on the front wheels because as I go back and stop and slow, so less and less weight is on the front axle as I'm going up. I could drive up there. I could. I think I could. But I'm not going to. while I'm on my own. Nobody here. We do have a sat phone, so in an emergency we could contact anybody we liked. I don't have an EPIRB. I'm not carrying one with me at this time. So maybe I should be carrying an EPIRB. So, but I've always carried a sat phone, and I have for decades. Should I be? So Paul, should I be carrying an EPIRB right now? I don't know. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Is it wise just to travel just myself and Gwyn, no other? Some people would say, never go out on your own. I say, no, I've been on my own. Not even with nobody, just myself, crossing deserts. And are there risks? Yes. But I understood what the risks were. And every now and again, a new risk, you're confronted with a new risk. And you have to look at it objectively and say, what if? What if climbing that hill? What if? What else could happen? By far the most common thing that would happen here would be a vehicle accident. Then there are snake bites. So because in Australia there are a lot of venomous snakes, be aware. Again, be aware of the risk. How do you counteract the risk? Now, most of the time I wear long trousers. In Australia, long trousers are a significant protection. They won't prevent you being envenomated if you get bitten by a venomous snake, but they go a long way to prevent a deep bite. In Africa, less so, because the snakes are front-fanged as opposed to back-fanged. Okay, so, but boots are absolutely essential. So where's the other risk? Spinifex grass. Get in your socks and in your shoes. Wear boots. Scorpions. Wear boots. Africa, I wear boots. I remember one situation. I'd done my 66-day expedition, longest single expedition I ever did. And we were coming right at the very, very end. And I'd been wearing my boots, and I put on some Crocs around the campfire. And a scorpion stung me in the side of the foot. And I was in abject agony for 30 minutes. And then I was fine. But imagine if it had been something more dangerous. I could have been in real trouble. We were in the middle of nowhere. We had a sat phone. We did not have EPIRB. Okay, that's enough for me. To me, it's okay to take risks. It's okay to take risks. People, in my view, that never take risks do not live a fulfilling life. Or they live a less fulfilling life. It's true. You have to take risks if you want to experience the richness of life. But unnecessary risks? No. And just going out doing a risky thing like overlanding on your own, I wouldn't call it risky. I don't think it's risky. Hang on a minute. It is risky. If you do not understand the risks at all, this is risky. But if you understand the risks and you take the phone, you wear boots, you make sure you've got extra water, 2 tanks of water, so you, if the worst comes to the worst and you lose your primary container of water, you have backup water. There are not a lot of things, but they are very important. And I know Paul has a fantastic story to tell about how he teaches, because he teaches these, actually runs classes. I don't. It's easier talking to a camera than people. And he has some fantastic stories about risks and about how he. Well, I'm not going to jump the gun. Paul, it's over to you, and then Jeramay. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Hello, I'm Paul Marsh. Thank you for joining us. It's always good to connect with you, and certainly to be a part of what Andrew's put together, just to share our knowledge and information. And today we're talking about risk. So what is risk? What does risk involve going on an overland expedition in a four-wheel drive? Well, I'll tell you now, it's actually very real. If I think back on some of the situations I've encountered on expeditions where I've made mistakes or I haven't listen to my gut, or I've done something totally stupid. It's all culminated in taking a risk that I possibly thought was something I could get away with, or something that I was ignorant because I didn't have the experience or the training. So, really, how do we manage it? And I think we should start by looking at what are the risks. And for me, the biggest risk you're going to have is having an accident. An accident is probably something you look at when you head out on expedition in a vehicle that quite often you haven't driven very much. You're in a foreign country, the vehicle's been completely built up, so the weight has changed, the center of gravity's changed, and you're now trying to get used to all of this. And the worst possible situation you can put yourselves in is when you hire a vehicle. You fly into a country that you don't know very well, you pick up a vehicle, you're probably dehydrated from the flight, you're probably jet lagged, you haven't slept, you've spent hours trying to tie up all the loose ends before you left your home, and here you are ready to pick up your vehicle and head off on an expedition. And of course this is where the biggest risk comes in, because inevitably you want to get on the road, you want to get to your destination, and we're still in the do mode. We've still got all the distractions floating around in our head. We haven't actually managed to switch out of our life we've just stepped away from. And of course those distractions, the fact we're not really centered, present maybe in the moment of what we're trying to do, and also the lack of maybe experience, the fact we're tired, and then there's an accident. And when you look back at and unpack it, you find that we probably made some very simple mistakes. Things we could have done differently, things that might have resulted in a better outcome, like coming in a day earlier, having some good sleep, hydrating yourself. You're coming from a cold climate to a hot climate. It's quite a shock for the body to adjust. So if you can limit how you throw so much at yourself to try and compete and trying to deal with and trying to manage all at the same time, and then on top of it you're trying to make a decision. So I think when I go back to risk, an accident is a very real situation. It's something that happens more often than not when people aren't focused on concentrating, and it's happened to me. I've had a near fatal accident in South America. I was on a 3-month rally. We had 100 vehicles in Uruguay. I flipped my vehicle and I rolled it 6 times and I broke my neck. So I'm sitting here today because I was very lucky. I had a doctor and a good friend of mine in the car with me, who basically he's an orthopedic surgeon. He pulled me out of the vehicle and he saved my life, together with a surgeon who operated on me in Uruguay. So I'm here today because a risk I took, and when I unpacked that situation, what went wrong? We were desperately tired. We had actually burnt ourselves out. We were driving way too fast. I was driving way too fast on roads that were difficult, and we were pushing ourselves to try and catch up to the rally. When you add all that together, the price was high. My life. What's that worth? Well, I go back and I looked at that experience, and it's a long time ago. And of course, you take experience, and as I say, hindsight is always amazing. And I've taken that experience and experiences I've come across in different scenarios, where I've come across accidents in Russia, where we came across a guy in a small car and he skidded off a road and he was buried pretty much in snow. And had we not been awake driving, we wouldn't have seen him. And minus 40-something degrees outside, this guy was struggling to, let alone keep himself alive, but trying to dig his car out. So we don't really know, where we push the limits or how we push the limits. But I think when you take risk and you set a set of boundaries and a set of rules that you work towards, you mitigate a lot of risk. You actually put it into the safety zone again, which I think is really valuable. So if I look at driving and an accident, I think when you go on expedition, it can be one of the safest times to drive. Why? If you're going to drive slowly, speed is one of the biggest accident causes. In Namibia, the highest number of rollovers in the world happen in Namibia on some of the best gravel roads. Why? People drive too fast. They often aren't in four-wheel drive, permanent, firm four-wheel drive, either with a diff lock in a Land Rover or an H4 in a Land Cruiser. They're driving in two-wheel drive. They're in a car that's heavy, they're not used to it, they're not sure quite how to drive on these dirt roads, which are like driving on marbles at times, tire pressures aren't set properly, and of course they add into the mix, they're tired and dehydrated. You can see where this is going. So how do we make it safe? Well, I look at it and say, you look at how you feel, you look at your knowledge, you look at your skill level. Certainly if you're going to travel on roads and you drive slowly and get used to it slowly, the vehicle, and you don't drive at night. Night driving anywhere is dangerous, and in Africa it's pretty much a no-no, because animals you will not see at night. And a black cow on the road or a donkey, you hit that with a car, you're very lucky if you walk away from that. So I look at that and say, we're going to make that safe. We're going to mitigate that risk massively, because we're going to put a set of rules in place. If you're driving two of you, take time to swap over. Both of you need to be comfortable driving the vehicle. Your skill level that you learn, I always say it's what you don't know that you need to be aware of, because ignorance is actually a poor excuse. So when you're going on expedition, take that responsibility. Take responsibility to learn the skills that you should have. You know, these days, overlanding is becoming very accessible to most people. You just have to be prepared to do some work, learn some skills, prepare yourself properly, prepare your vehicle properly, make sure you're safe, and you can pretty much head anywhere.
For me, risk is synonymous with planning, in that when we talk about risk, we're really talking about how do you get rid of so much risk and how do you plan to do that. I think me and my buddies, mates, we don't really use the word risk to say, well, how do we take risk out of this trip? But what we do say is, your stuff better not break down, Todd. Or if we're going to go on this boat, what is it ready to go? Did it get worked on? What's the maintenance look like? And I think there's nothing better than going on a trip and knowing that things are going to work. So you were talking about risk in terms of when you get somewhere, the decisions you make. And I think that's a very valid topic. And I'm sure Paul's going to have some great comments on that. I'm looking forward to his story.
What else are risks? Certainly the animals in Africa, you're going to find that is risky. So, how do we mitigate that? Well, if there are monkeys in the camp, which quite often around campsites you can be sure there are, and they're really clever, these little monkeys. They know how to open tents, and when it says St Pierre White on the tent, they make a special effort to open that tent, and they look for the text bar he hid that he could eat late at night. And of course, it doesn't go down well when you lose your text bar.
Well, I'm busy sorting out my tent before I go to sleep. Actually, they didn't do too much damage. They ripped a few plastic bags. I had a text bar. I buy these South African sweet candy bars, and they nicked one. Stolen. It's the last straw. They didn't. At least they didn't defecate. They often do that. I have actually I've been defecated upon by a baboon. What is that noise?
When you're camping wild, you're going to get situations where animals will wander into your camp. It's not fenced in many cases. So you need to be very aware of how do you react in that situation. How can I prepare myself to know what should I do? What could I do? Lighting is good. A fire, perimeter lighting around the vehicle is good. I always say that if a vehicle's got a dark side, we live out of one side of the vehicle, let's say the side where the awning is, and maybe the back where you get in and out of the car. But the side that you don't go to, if that's in dark shadow, animals can come quite close. They're inquisitive. They want to know what. You walk around the vehicle. I've done it. I've come across hyena and a few others. And I must say, it gives you a bit of a shock. So, but understanding what is dangerous and what should you do and how should you react. So if you're going to go for a pee at night, what do? If you check everything's safe and you're camped in a reasonably open area and you've got good torch, you can scan around, well, yes, go down the ladder. Go to the loo, come back up. It's more about understanding what to do and how to do it to give you the confidence that being in the wild, you can be safe. you can be safe with the animals. I think it's more about being safe from ourselves. And then we look at around the vehicle. Think about what can go wrong. Slipping off a roof rack and breaking something miles from anywhere. Cutting yourself really badly. These are things we don't actually think of until it all goes wrong, and then you're trying to manage that situation. So, I look and say, if we're going to go on an expedition, one of the other concerns is getting sick and getting ill. So how can we prepare ourselves better for that? I take my first aid kit and I divide one section into a trauma section and one section into the sort of medicines, as I say, the pills and the creams and the lotions. The trauma bit, you need to do training. You both need to do training. You'll be surprised what it takes to save someone's life with a little bit of knowledge. Being able to do CPR. I was sitting in Dar es Salaam at a swimming pool, having a drink after a big expedition, having driven up to Tanzania. And a small child fell in the pool. And I didn't notice it until I saw the gardener. The man took his boots off, he jumped into the pool, and he had this limp child in his arms. And very fortunately, I was able to bring this child back to life. CPR, and it's humbling to do that. But if I didn't have that knowledge, would that child have survived? And if we're really remote, how much more pressure is there on you? So take that responsibility to learn what it takes to do the simple things that can actually save a life. Stop bleeding, keep airways open, just manage the basics. An accident is something, if you come across, is a scenario where you want to be very competent in how you manage this. And dealing with accidents, accident management as I call it, it's really important that you understand how the safety side works. If you're coming to help at an accident, you need to be safe. How you park your car, how you let other road users know there's an accident. If it's in the middle of the bush, you can break branches off the tree and put it in the road. People know that basically signifies there's something a problem around the corner. Obviously, warning triangles help, but there's ways of telling people, and knowing what to take to the accident scene, how to make yourself safe, where that equipment is in your vehicle and when you need it. And I do a lot of scenario processing with clients to actually go through, what if this happens? Let's discuss how you should react, what equipment you should have. Because when you do that, you absolutely can be absolutely sure that that knowledge will kick in, even if you haven't had the experience. You'll know what to do, how to do it.
When I think about motorcycles, I think about tire pressures, just like I do on a truck. But in the case of a motorcycle, your tire pressures are so important that just 1 or 2 pounds makes a big difference for the ability to handle, for the ability for the bike to hold a corner. Various kinds of weather have a huge effect, and weather is an effect in all kinds of overlanding. But for me, the planning has to do so much with maintenance. Know that it's going to cost, and if money is the driving factor for everything, then you have to really start to curate your hobbies. You don't have to have unlimited money. I certainly don't. I know Andrew certainly doesn't. But we know that if we're going to do something, you have to spend a certain amount of money to ensure that the trip you're about to take is really enjoyable. You've mitigated the risk to the point where it's manageable, but it really becomes a lot of fun. So in motorcycle riding, as I look through my notes, I think the things that are important that you must have, right, which are different than if you're riding maybe in a truck. Think about your boots. You think about your jacket, which has armor into it, your pants, which have armor into them, the socks you wear in your boots on a motorcycle. All those things, you're essentially putting the outside shell of your car on your body. Those things become a really big deal in terms of risk management. So you plan for them and you pay for them. You don't decide that if it's a $400 piece of kit and you can get it for $30, maybe you will go $30. On a motorcycle, you don't play that kind of game, especially if you're going to do any kind of distance, and especially if you're going to go with various areas, various elevations, various weather, various temperatures. Those are not the places to skimp. When you're traveling with a motorcycle, the weight that you take with you, how you're going to be exposed in the morning and the noon and the evenings, whether it's going to change in temperature, which it always does, and you have to plan for that. Having an understanding of mechanically how your machine works. On a motorcycle and a boat too are probably some of the most important ways to mitigate risk. You don't have to be a mechanic per se, but you need to be able to fix some basic things. Fuel pumps, basic electrical, tires, the things that make your bike safe, you've got to understand. So when you plan, mitigating risk is all about kind of understanding and planning. I think something that people don't think about when they think about risk, though, this is going to be an odd topic, but I'll bring it up anyway, is the notion of people, like who you take with you. When you plan a motorcycle ride, for example, don't bring a guy who never works on his bike. Don't take the guy. Your trip will not be as much fun unless you just love comedy relief and you love being stuck somewhere for a day at a time where you're sleeping on the side of the road or you're waiting for a tow truck. You may not want to take the guy. Now, if he's a really, really good mate, you might just overlook that. I know a guy like that. We overlook the fact that his bike never worked right. We love him anyway. We love to travel with him. Todd, you know who you are. When you're boating, I have to say, if you're going to spend time on the water and you're going to put together a trip that's multiple days where you're camping and living and kind of the amount of time on the water is significant. The kind of people you take with you is going to drastically affect your risk factor. It's the same thing with overland camping. The people you take with you are going to change the risk. Their willingness to take a risk may not be based on the same knowledge that you have. So pick people that lower your risk. If you really want to take somebody with you that doesn't know what they're doing, then maybe your trip should change. Seriously. It's not being drastic or even being inconsiderate. Take people that know what they're doing, you can do different things. Take people that don't know what they're doing, and it changes your trip, and you need to plan accordingly. You need to, because safety is a big deal. I have to tell you, when I take my wife on my boat, there's never a time in all the overlanding and the travel that I do that I am more focused on safety than with her on the boat. She's not an experienced boating person. I wouldn't say I'm drastically experienced either. I'm not. I'm learning as I go. I have different capabilities than she does. I have different understanding than she does. But what's amazing is that she loves to be out there, so we plan accordingly. There are things on the boat. There's safety. There's design things that put into the machine rather. I'm adding radar to the machine, and sat nav is GPS is a huge deal. Giving her the ability to see sat nav and be part of that is important, so she knows where we are. These are all things that mitigate risk, and it changes the way I plan if I'm going to have her with me on the trip, which is great because frankly I should be planning that way anytime, right? I mean, I should be lowering risk regardless of who I'm taking with me. The weather. I think, Andrew, when you and I traveled in the Northwest, you were stunned and amazed, although you've been many places, but how many different climates we can travel through in such a short time. We spent time in Washington State, Oregon, California, Utah, Arizona, and even within just Oregon, and many of you who know the Pacific Northwest know that it drastically changes from coastal weather across the Cascades into kind of eastern high desert and into grasslands. It's just stunningly gorgeous. But I'll tell you, when you're traveling in a truck or motorcycle, that terrain and going from 80, 90 degrees Fahrenheit in sunny days into shaded roads where there's potentially ice the same day. You can be in snow in the afternoon and you can be in t-shirt only weather in the evening or vice versa. The weather is a major part of risk. So I think planning for it is really important. It shouldn't be something, though, that keeps you from traveling. Once you learn how to plan, and there's a combination of ways to learn how to plan. Look online for a list of things that you should take with you for safety, for food prep, for sleeping, for mechanical tool sets and these things. That's all part of the planning you should do. But there's things that are really personal that you learn how to do that lower risk depending on how you operate. Let me give you a very personal example. I have been sleeping with, Andrew's mentioned the show, a CPAP machine, continuous pressure air machine, for the last better part of 20 years. And I travel with it all over the world. I travel with it No matter where I go, camping, at home, I never leave without it. It's how I sleep. Can I sleep without it? Yes, not great, because my body's gotten so used to it. It's very comfortable. It just kind of takes me into a very relaxed state. And I know a lot of people that keeps them from going out. But here's the thing. If I didn't have it, if somehow my CPAP was not able to run, and I've run it off my motorcycle, which I do, and it works great. I run it off my boat. I run it off my truck. And everything about those vehicles is set up to make sure that I can do that. If I could not use that device for a day, my energy level would decline, and 2 days and 3 days gone by, and I wouldn't be sleeping well. Even if I got to sleep, I wouldn't be sleeping well. My risk would go up dramatically for how well I could ride a motorcycle. It would go up dramatically for how long and kind of how long I would be on a boat and be able to travel that way. Boats and motorcycles are interestingly exhausting in that, and everyone who rides bikes and everyone who is into boating knows this. It is not the same as riding in a car, or the same as riding in an airplane. I mean, let's just talk about travel in general. When you're in a vehicle, your body is constantly adjusting to vibration, to balance, and you don't know it. It's part of how we operate. It's how we stay upright when we're on a vehicle or in a vehicle. On a motorcycle, you're doing it to an extreme because even though the bike is moving under you and you're with it, you're constantly using your weight to balance, and you're constantly adjusting how you are on that machine. When you're in a boat, it's the same thing. Now the balance shifts to you're compensating for moving water. The ground underneath you is quite literally moving. Your body changes. On a boat, and on a motorcycle, but on a boat, it is what drastically impacts you is usually you're boating in nice weather, typically. That nice weather, that warm weather will dehydrate you. And the balance plus the dehydration plus the warm weather, and you think you're on the water doing great, you have to compensate for that. If you can't sleep, if you're not physically feeling great, it increases your risk in that you're exposed to the elements differently in each of those scenarios. The easiest version of that is the vehicle, right? Your truck or your car, where you're fairly comfortable in today's modern vehicles, and you can put on many, many miles and do quite well. You'll be tired. Your body's still tired, but it's not as tired as when you're motorcycle, when you're in a boat. And Andrew will talk to you about airplanes and what that does to your body.
Since you asked, Jeremy, I cannot make a comparison with flying, long distance cross-country flying, with say motorcycling or boating, because I don't have experience of those two. But the challenge with flying cross-country is not really too different than overland, long distance overlanding. I'm a kind of a what if kind of guy. I'm always thinking, what if they don't have fuel at the next stop? What if I get lost? What if I am incapacitated and I can no longer drive the car? Is whoever is with me, are they going to know, yeah, they can drive the car. Can they drive it off-road? And do they know where we are and how to get out of here in an emergency? So when I'm traveling with people, always let them know what I'm navigating, the navigating decisions. Get them involved in the navigating decisions, because then if something does happen, they can take over, and the likelihood that it will turn out well. With flying, yes, it's far more physically stimulating, and you have a lot of things to do than when driving, but it's still, where am I? And with driving, of course, it's where am I going to stop and where am I going to get fuel? With an aircraft, it's where am I? And if I have a problem, what am I going to do? In other words, when doing a route, you have alternates all the way along. I can route to X, Y, and Z place and land in the case of a mechanical issue. And then, of course, not unlike driving, you've got where am I going to fuel? And weather. Everything depends on weather. Because when the weather gets bad, the last thing you want to do in your life is to be in the air wishing you were on the ground.
How serious do you take safety is one thing, when you're talking about yourself. But how seriously you take safety when somebody comes with you is a very different conversation. I would do a lot less for myself. Not very smart, but I would do less for myself. If my son were with me, it changes. But then I generally know his capabilities. If my wife is with me, it changes again because I know her capabilities. If I have friends that are familiar with the outdoors, it's a different profile and risk that I'm willing to take than if I'm taking their family or their wife, or my mother-in-law, for example. We don't do. She doesn't travel with us. She's in her 80s, but she does like to go for a drive, which is, if you really want to get technical, that's still overlanding. I plan, somewhat subconsciously, to take her with us, and do we have some water in the car? How much fuel? Do we need to stop for fuel? How much time do we have before she's too tired to continue on for the day? These are things that you take and just scale up as you go into different kinds of activities. I think the people you take with you define the level of risk you're willing to take. If it's not, then if they don't, then you should reconsider, because I do think it's a big deal. Having all the technology, yes. Understanding your vehicle to the level of you being able to safely troubleshoot to be able to get back home, or to at least get back to a place of safety, off to the side of the road, a rest area, whatever it might be, is imperative. You do not have to be the best mechanic. You should absolutely have basic tools, you should absolutely have basic understanding, and you should absolutely have a basic kit. Not 16 of everything. You don't need that. And Paul, if you guys haven't watched Paul Marsh's shows on detail and what his experience, you need to. He really, really, really can help you understand what's important and what can be left behind when it comes to building your kit for safety. Please go watch Paul's stuff. There's no better teacher out there.
What is another risk? Getting stuck. I mean, getting stuck can be disastrous. You can get so badly stuck, you wouldn't want to know, how you're going to get out. So it's so important that you take the time to understand how to get a vehicle unstuck, what equipment do I need, and how to use it safely. I think a high lift jack is one of those feared pieces of equipment that people really fear using, and you should fear it. It is a dangerous piece of equipment. So is an electric saw, so can an electric drill be. But if you learn how to use it properly, and you learn where you use it, where you don't use it, it's not used to change a wheel. Let's just put that out there. But it is a really good piece of equipment when you're stuck in the sand or mud, to lift your vehicle up, to clear the chassis off the mud or off the sand, to fill in under the wheels. And that can save you a lot of time and energy, and obviously it might be the only way you get your vehicle out, So having the right equipment and knowing how to use it can actually minimize risk. Being stuck out. I remember being on one trip and I got really badly stuck. It was horrendous. It was at high altitude. It was in South America. We'd driven high up, I think it was up near Lake Titicaca, and I wanted to take a picture. And I thought it'd be really cool to get down close to the lake. Well, the mistake was the mud and the rain had come in and the ground was pretty soft, and I didn't get out and check. And I drove in and got stuck. So here we are, haven't eaten properly, we're late, we're behind the group, we got stuck in mud really badly. And of course you don't think about protecting yourself, all you focus on is we need to get this vehicle unstuck, it's getting dark and all that. And the old adage of stop, make a cup of tea and think about things is so true if you only put it into practice. And we don't always do that. I don't always do it, but I try, because if you stop and think about it, have I got sunscreen on? Have I hydrated myself? Am I warm enough? Do I need to take a break amidst this process of trying to get the vehicle out? Or am I going to try and push myself until I collapse? And then, of course, you add extra risk to everything. So when you're looking at situations like that, it's really important to manage it from a point of view of not fear, but of knowledge. When you've got the knowledge, and probably, the experience comes with time, you will feel more confident in that situation to actually process the recovery or process the event you want to deal with in a way that you can think about it, you can make a plan, and you can carry out the plan. and take away the fear and take away the pressure, because it all comes into perspective. You know, if you have to wait an extra day, so what? Does it make it safer? Yeah, it probably does. Very important.
But I think that as I look at overlanding from a perspective of just enjoying it, I think, Andrew, one of my favorite conversations you and I had is, it's not the camping that you love, it's waking up in beautiful places. On a boat, on a motorcycle, in a truck, regardless of how you get there. When you take the electrics out of it, the braking, the batteries, the air, the flat tires, broken suspension, you know, the things that can happen, and again, depending on the kind of travel you're doing, but if you take that out of it and you're able to just enjoy the beautiful place, and it goes out of your mind that things could happen, and they can, so you adjust. When you take that out because of planning, the trip changes completely. As an amateur photographer, and I mean amateur like I've got a good 40 years to get to get good at this. There's enough going on when I'm on a trip about trying to get a shot and following the light and understanding all these things that go with photography. And those of you photographers know, taking the picture is not the hard part, right? I want to think about that as an artist. I want to think about that as a photographer. I don't want to think about whether my boat's working or not. So the effort and the planning I put into the boat working lets me be a photographer and lets me have that experience. Even if you're not in photography, if what you love is hiking and exploring, making sure your motorcycle runs well and is maintained well lets you get to the trailhead and then lets you hike that 2 or 3 days into the lake, that high mountain lake you want to get to, because you don't have to worry if the motorcycle is going to get you there, and then more importantly, it's going to get you home. If something happens, does it work well enough to get you home? In a boat, does it work well enough to get you home? All the things that you can use, and there are a myriad of them, radio communications. Andrew, you talked about satellite phones. If you're not in sub-Saharan Africa, maybe radio, the UHF or VHF, depending on the country you're in. These are all fantastic things, close range, long range. Those should all be considered as kit, depending on where you are, that you should have access to. That should not be left out just because you think, well, nothing will ever happen. Something will absolutely happen. If it's not to you, then somebody else. It will happen. Not catastrophic, but something will happen. And then you adjust. It's actually literally part of risk management. It's why there's risk. But the planning is really what makes it fun. If you don't know what to take, do your research. Watch the Overland Workshops. Watch Andrew and Paul and many other fantastic Mac. There's a video with Mac that is just excellent when you start talking about vehicle building. I could just go on forever about some of the videos out there. And a lot of other good channels, Andrew, that you've mentioned prior that really talk about doing this and doing it well. The key, though, is that what all people, professionals like you, Andrew, and like Paul have in common is the planning and understanding enough to be safe and really, really enjoy the trip. When you see pictures of people who travel internationally or nationally, frankly, if you live in the U.S., you don't need to go anywhere. It is so stunning. The more I travel, the more I realize, and I love going overseas, especially with Andrew, the more I realize how much I have to explore, more than a lifetime's worth of places to explore. But for me, I think the joy is, and the pictures that I think of and the moments that I remember are the ones with those beautiful starry nights around that campfire. We're all sitting there having a cold one, or we love to do, as Gwynnie always makes us, a cup of tea and a chocolate in the evenings. One of my favorite things about being with Andrew and Gwen and with Paul is that tea and that chocolate in the evening. Not something that I grew up with culturally. Those are the pictures and the moments I remember. And the reason I bring that up, the reason I say that, is because what I don't think about is the fact that we had a broken down tire. We had a punctured tire that was on a rubbish bearing and in a bad vehicle. That's not the piece I remember. I do remember the story, and we've done that, and we've been there, and we've dug ourselves out for Oh man, we have lots of bad stories that are fantastic now that you're not doing them. But the pictures we take are the beautiful moments. The whole point is to get to the beautiful moment. It's that nightscape. It's that river crossing. It's that lake. It's the fishing.
And I think about a time when I drove up through Africa and we were at Lake Turkana. Beautiful, beautiful. That Jade Sea is incredible. And we left a little village in the morning. No satellite phone, no GPS, just a compass and an old Michelin map with a handful of written instructions. And we got one instruction wrong. And I remember we drove around the desert for about 4 hours, came across this little village. And I'll never forget, this kid came up and he said to me, "You back again?" And I kind of looked and I thought, did I just hear him say I'm back again? And I looked at my wife and I said, we don't have the fuel to have got lost. And if I think I know what we've done a big circle in the desert. And we weren't paying attention, we weren't focused, we were following directions that we thought were right. And of course we'd done a massive big circle, but we'd also used up too much fuel, we had enough water, which meant we had to take another route to try and get back to the Moyale Marsabit road that goes up to Ethiopia. And we ended up driving across the salt pan. So there was this 2 tracks. You're young, this is one of the early trips I did. You believe you can do it, it looks good. And we drove along this, just one vehicle, 2 of us. We had a tow 4 winch, nothing fancy, driving across this salt pan, 2 tracks. And we come across 2 camels standing in the tracks, on the tracks. And I just had this gut feeling. And I wanted to drive round, but knew I shouldn't. And we stopped, and these camels were reluctant to move off the road, and it was like, what do I do? And when the gut feeling comes in, listen to it. And try and tune into that, because we will all get it. As we pushed the camels off those 2 tracks, they went up to mud, soft mud, and up to their sort of knees. So had we done that, we would have been really stuck, So again, you hear situations where people have come through, luckily for us then, but we listen to our gut. So, how could we have done it differently? There are lots of ways we could have done it differently. And, today we have communications. We have incredible ways to communicate. So before you head off on an expedition, and there's obviously illnesses to look at, there's things that can go wrong in the campsite, there's, medicine that you might need. Connect with a doctor before you leave on expedition. You need a medical first aid kit? Sure. But try and find someone that if you're on the route, you could WhatsApp, you could call, you could get some advice. It goes a long way when you're really remote. And quite often in a family or someone you'll know, a doctor who could give you that help. And make sure you've got good evacuation insurance. Because when things do go wrong, you want to already have worked through that plan that you need to sort out. You want to know how the evacuation process is going to happen. You want to know you've got the right numbers to call and contact, and you've got the information like the insurance policy number to hand. Because time is always against you in those scenarios. So it's really important that when you're setting up and preparing yourself and you're learning the skills on how you can be better prepared, be better equipped, part of it is the preparation, and part of that preparation is making sure you've got the vehicle, you've got the equipment, you know how to use it, you've learned the skill level, and not just one of you, both of you, because if you're traveling together as a couple, you never know who might need the help. So you both better be able to drive the car, change the wheel as much as you can, cross over. And I think that's really, really important.
I went on a trip with an amazing guide in Utah some years back, and I had recently bought my truck, and it was full of everything that I had bought with the truck, and I was 2 states away, and it was full of things, and I didn't have any place to put this stuff. So I went on this trip with Bill Burke is his name, four-wheel driving America, I think, Bill Burke. I had all this garbage in my truck, and I mean garbage, it was real kit, but I literally had to take it with me on the trip with Bill, and I think I met Bill, and he looked at me like I was absolutely insane that I had brought all this kit with me. I didn't need any of it, really. I just didn't have anywhere to put it. I couldn't leave it on the side of the road. So I traveled with a mess of off-road gear and recovery gear and things that I didn't need for this kind of trip. And he looked at me and says, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "No, seriously, there's a story." He goes, "Okay, we'll talk about it over dinner." And we did, and we laughed about it. But the reality is too much kit is a joke. You don't want to do that. Planning and taking out the things you don't need are as important as the things you bring with you. Think about who's coming with you. Think about who you're going to take with you. Think about the weather. Think about how long, and think about what it is you really want to do. If you're into photography, think about how to plan for those moments and then pack and do things accordingly.
The night is settling in. The wind is dying down. The night sounds, actually there are no night sounds in Australia, but if there were night sounds like insects and nightjars, you do get nightjars in Australia. I haven't heard any here. The atmosphere around the camp changes. And that, to me, and Gwyn, is magic time.
If you're not a photographer, but you love to sit and play guitar by the water, which I love to do, and you want to make sure you get those moments in, plan accordingly. If what you really love is an evening with tea and chocolate where you sit around the campfire and tell stories, plan accordingly. If you do, you'll get to those moments. And it's not easy to learn this stuff. You really have to go do it to figure out what you need and what you don't.
Yeah, it's just a case of looking at risk. Don't ever be, I feel, afraid of risk. I think face risk with a healthy respect. Face risk knowing that with knowledge, with skills, you can accomplish a successful trip. Doesn't mean to say things are always going to go right. That's part of the fun. Things go wrong, you make a plan, you talk to people, people help you. In the least expected situation, you'll be surprised how people will come and help you. And it's humbling to have that experience. But I think, when I look at these sort of situations and I look back on what's gone wrong in expeditions, I can always attribute it to the small things that we didn't do right that culminated in like a snowball effect and got worse and bigger and more risky until eventually it got out of control and then something happens. So, we all learn, we all make mistakes. I've certainly had my fair share of that. But I must say, I found what really works is to be well planned, well prepared. Learn what you don't know, learn those skills, be confident that, and make sure that you plan your trip so that you mitigate risk to make it safe and have fun and enjoy it. And I'll see you on the road sometime. I'm sure our paths will cross somewhere, and I look forward to that conversation.
I guess the last thing that I would mention is don't be tricked into thinking that you have to buy every single thing you see other people with in order to go have a good time and be risk-free. You do not need a massive tent on top of your vehicle. I guarantee you, you do not. If you have one, that is amazing. I hope you use it and you really enjoy it. But you don't have to have that to be safe. Nothing is going to eat you. I'm sorry, it's not. No, I'm not sorry. It's not going to eat you. But it takes a while to get used to the idea. It's okay to go try this idea of planning in your car, put the back seat down. You could have a small car. It could be a Subaru Outback, which are great. It could be a Honda. It could be any make you can think of. It does not have to be Andrew's Dream Tour to have a good time. Don't get me wrong. It makes for a good time, but you don't have to. You can have a very, very low risk experience with a little bit of planning and a little bit of education. And remember that what you're trying to do is do something that you love. That's the whole point. I hope it makes sense. I hope it helps. I think about risk all the time. I think about it in terms of planning. I love the planning process because I get to sit and noodle on what I want to do and what I want to bring. The last thing I'll mention is tools for that. One of my favorite ways to plan, maybe if you take nothing else away from my video, is a free tool called Trello. Trello.com. If you don't know what it is, that's okay. Look it up. Trello is a system, very simple application. It's an app. You can run it in a browser. You can also run it on your phone, and you can run it on your PC, and they automatically sync together. It's designed for making lists. There's so many things you can do with this. The format of the tool is called a Kanban board. And for those of you who do planning, you may have heard of a Kanban board, especially for project management. But don't worry about any of that. It's a list tool, and it's such a good tool for planning trips. A lot of planning is about making a list, getting through that list, sticking to it, and executing on that list. You do that, you will lower risk, and your trips will be amazing. Trello is a great way to do that. It's and we're not sponsored by them. Would love to be. Fantastic app. Use something like that. Use a list. And if you like using things on your phone and your PC and you like them syncing, excellent. If you like a white book, spiral notebook, or a yellow pad of paper, whatever it is, make a list. And then execute the list, and then go have a good time. For me, that's how I lower risk, and I look forward to the next conversation. I hope this is something you might be able to use.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't already, subscribe and click the notifications bell so you don't miss our weekly videos.